I showed up to my dad's retirement BBQ 3 weeks ago and walked out knowing I'd just destroyed him. Let me explain. I'm 28. I deliver food on a bicycle. I live in a basement apartment that costs $600 a month, and yeah, the water heater is garbage, so I shower at the gym most days. My dad is Henry, my mom is Connie, my brother Cody is 31 and works in finance, my sister Kayla is 25 and does something with marketing. They all live in nice houses in nice neighborhoods, and I'm the family embarrassment. Always have been. The party was at my parents' house. 50-plus people in the backyard, all his golf buddies and neighbors and work friends. I brought a gift card because that's what I could afford. $30 to some restaurant he likes. I figured I'd drop it off, eat some food, leave early. I hadn't seen my family in 8 months, and that was fine by me. I walked through the side gate into the backyard, and my dad saw me immediately. He was holding a microphone, because of course he was giving speeches. The second he spotted me, he got this look on his face, and I knew what was coming. He raised the microphone, and his whole face changed into this performance of disgust. "Hold up, everyone. My biggest mistake just walked in." The entire yard went quiet. 50 people turned to stare at me. My mom stood up from her chair and started laughing. She actually said, "Jesus Christ, look at him. Still wearing the same shirt from 3 years ago," which wasn't even true, but whatever. My dad kept going. He told everyone I was 28 years old and delivered Uber Eats on a bicycle. He said I couldn't even afford a moped. His golf buddies thought this was hilarious. My uncle Elliot, my dad's brother, jumped in and said his 16-year-old had a BMW. Everyone laughed harder. My dad kept the microphone. He told 50 people that I lived in a basement that smelled like piss and ramen. He said I showered at Planet Fitness because my landlord shut off my water. My brother Cody walked over, grabbed the gift card out of my hand, ripped it open, and announced to everyone that I'd brought a $30 gift card. He said Dad spends more than that on his morning coffee. Then he threw it at my face. My sister Kayla added that I got fired from a pizza place for stealing breadsticks, which also wasn't true, but the whole yard was eating it up. Some neighbor named Larry said even crackheads have standards. Everyone laughed. My dad's face got serious then. He said I was embarrassing him in front of his friends and I needed to leave. Just like that. "Leave now." I smiled. I'd been waiting 3 years for this moment. I pulled an envelope out of my jacket pocket and handed it to him. I said, "Read it tonight, alone." Then I got on my bike and rode off while they all laughed and made jokes behind me. Here's what nobody at that party knew. That house they were all standing in? The one my parents have lived in for 30 years? My grandmother left it to all 3 of her grandchildren when she died. Me, Cody, and Kayla. Equal shares. My parents have a life estate, which means they can live there until they die, but they don't own it outright. We do. My grandmother died 9 years ago. I was 19. I just dropped out of college after 1 semester because I hated it and had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. My parents were furious. They said I was throwing my life away. Cody was in grad school. Kayla was getting straight A's in high school. I was the failure who couldn't hack it. When my grandmother's will was read, my parents explained it to us like they were doing us a favor. They said Grandma left the house in trust and we'd inherit it eventually, but they were managing everything. They said we didn't need to worry about any of it. I was 19 and stupid and dealing with my own mess, so I didn't ask questions. Cody and Kayla didn't either. We all just signed whatever papers the lawyer put in front of us and moved on. But about 3 years ago, I was going through some old boxes at my apartment and found a copy of the will. I read it carefully, really carefully. It said the house was left to the 3 grandchildren as tenants in common. My parents had a life estate. But here's the thing about tenants in common. Any co-owner can force a partition sale at any time, which means any one of us could go to court and make them sell the house and split the proceeds 3 ways. I did research. A lot of research. I learned that my parents had been treating that house like they owned it completely. They'd refinanced twice. They'd taken out a home equity line of credit. They'd made improvements and remodeled the kitchen, all while telling us it was in trust and we'd get it eventually. But the will was clear. We owned it. They just got to live there. I started thinking about how they'd treated me my entire life. I was never good enough. Cody was the golden child who did everything right. Kayla was the baby who could do no wrong. I was the middle kid who couldn't hold down a job, couldn't finish school, couldn't get my life together. Every family gathering was just another opportunity for them to point out my failures. Every holiday dinner included some comment about when I was going to get a real job or move out of whatever apartment I was in. 3 years ago, I made a decision. I was going to let them think I was exactly what they said I was. A failure, a loser, someone who would never amount to anything. And while they thought that, I was going to prepare. I got a job doing food delivery because the schedule was flexible and I could work as much as I wanted. I kept my expenses low. That basement apartment with the bad water heater? I could have afforded better. I chose not to. I saved every extra dollar. I looked into what it would take to force a partition sale. I found a lawyer who explained the process. I learned that in our state, any tenant in common has an absolute right to partition. The court can't deny it. The only question is whether they do a physical partition, which doesn't work for a house, or a partition by sale, which means selling the property and splitting the money. I called the lawyer back about 6 months ago. I told him I was ready to move forward, but I wanted to wait for the right moment. He said that was fine. We prepared all the paperwork, a petition for partition, a notice to the other co-owners. Everything ready to file. The envelope I handed my dad contained a letter from my lawyer. It informed him that I was exercising my rights as a co-owner and filing for partition by sale. It explained that the house would be sold, the proceeds would be split 3 ways between me, Cody, and Kayla, and my parents would need to find somewhere else to live. It also mentioned that the refinancing and home equity line they'd taken out would be paid off first, which meant there'd be less money for everyone. But that wasn't my problem. The letter said I'd already contacted Cody and Kayla and explained the situation to both of them, which was true. I'd called Cody 2 days before the party. I explained what I'd learned about the will and what I was planning to do. He got quiet. Then he said I was being ridiculous and petty. He said I should just let it go and move on with my life. I told him that was easy for him to say since he hadn't spent the last decade being treated like garbage. He said I brought it on myself by dropping out of school and never getting my act together. I told him he could join me in forcing the sale and getting his share, or he could do nothing and I'd do it myself. His choice. He hung up on me. I called Kayla next. Same conversation. She cried. She said I was going to ruin the family. She said mom and dad would be devastated. I said they'd been devastating me for years and nobody cared. She said I was being selfish. I said she could either join me and get her third of the house value, or she could sit back and watch. She also hung up on me. The letter mentioned both of those calls. It made it clear that Cody and Kayla had been notified and had chosen not to join the action, but that didn't matter. I only needed myself to force the sale. One co-owner was enough. I got home from the party around 7 p.m. I knew my dad would read the letter eventually. I figured he'd call. I didn't expect what actually happened. My phone started ringing at 9:47 p.m. My dad. I didn't answer. He called again at 9:51. Again at 9:55. I turned my phone to silent and watched the screen light up over and over. By 11 p.m., I had 17 missed calls from my dad, 8 from my mom, 5 from Cody, and 3 from Kayla. I opened my voicemail around midnight, 43 messages total. I listened to the first few from my dad. The first one was him saying we needed to talk right away. This was serious. I needed to call him back immediately. His voice was tight. The second one was angrier. He said I couldn't do this. I didn't understand what I was doing. I was going to regret it. The third one was different. His voice cracked. He said I was destroying the family. He said we could work something out. He said I didn't really want to do this. By message 10, he was begging. He said they'd give me money. They'd help me get a better apartment. They'd co-sign for a car. Just please don't do this, please. My mom's voicemails were worse. She called me ungrateful. She said they'd raised me, and this was how I repaid them. She said I was breaking her heart. Then, in the next message, she said, I was a vindictive little piece of garbage who never appreciated anything they'd done for me. Then she went back to crying and begging. Cody left messages saying I was making a huge mistake. He said I didn't understand the financial implications. He said I was acting like a child. Kayla's messages were all crying. She said I was tearing the family apart. She said how could I do this to them? I didn't call any of them back that night. The next morning, my lawyer called. He said he'd received multiple calls from people claiming to represent my parents. He said he told them all that I was his client, and they needed to go through the proper legal channels. He asked if I wanted to proceed. I said yes. We filed the partition action that afternoon. Now here's where it gets interesting. My parents have lived in that house for 30 years. They bought it from my grandmother years before she died. But when she died, she'd had the deed changed so that my grandfather's estate had already been settled, and the house became ours with their life estate. They've made it their whole identity. My dad talks about the property value constantly. My mom has remodeled every room. They've hosted every family holiday there. All their friends know that house. And the house is worth about $850,000. After paying off their refinance mortgage and home equity line, which total about $320,000, that leaves $530,000. Split 3 ways. That's about $176,000 each for me, Cody, and Kayla. My parents will get nothing. They'll have to move. They're both 61 years old, and they'll have to figure out where to go and how to afford it on whatever retirement savings they have, which I'm guessing isn't much, based on how much they've borrowed against the house. $176,000 doesn't make me rich, but it's more money than I've ever had. It's enough to change my life, get a reliable car, get a better apartment, maybe go back to school, actually build something. And I earned it by being exactly who they said I was for 3 years, by letting them mock me and laugh at me and treat me like garbage while I saved and planned and waited. The voicemails kept coming for 3 days straight. I haven't listened to most of them. My lawyer said not to engage directly and to let him handle everything. The court date for the partition hearing is set for 2 months from now. My lawyer said it's a formality. The law is clear. I have the right to partition. The only question is how the sale will be handled and how quickly. My dad showed up at my apartment 4 days after the party. I didn't let him in. He stood outside and yelled through the door. He said I was killing my mother. He said I was destroying everything they'd built. He said I'd regret this for the rest of my life. I told him through the door that he should have thought about that before he humiliated me in front of 50 people. He said that was just a joke. He said I was being too sensitive. He said everyone makes fun of their kids and I needed to grow up. I opened the door then. I looked him in the face. I said this wasn't about the party. This was about every single time he'd made me feel worthless. Every comment about my job, every comparison to Cody, every disappointed look, every time he'd introduced me to his friends and I could see him wishing he didn't have to claim me as his son. I said I was done being the family embarrassment and he was about to learn what it felt like to lose everything. He tried to push past me into my apartment. I blocked him. He said we needed to talk about this like adults. I said adults don't humiliate their children at parties. Adults don't spend a decade making someone feel like garbage. I shut the door in his face. I'm writing this now because I need to tell someone what's happening and I can't talk to anyone in my family. My coworkers don't know any of this. My friends have heard bits and pieces but not the whole story. I needed to get it out somewhere. The partition sale is moving forward. My parents are going to lose their house. Cody and Kayla are furious with me, but they're going to get money out of it whether they want to or not. My entire family thinks I'm destroying everything over a grudge. But I'm not. I'm taking what's legally mine, what was always mine, and I'm done being treated like I don't matter. Update 1. I posted a week ago about forcing the sale of my parents' house through a partition action. A lot of you told me to stand firm and not back down. Some of you said I was being too harsh. I'm not backing down. But I need to update you because this situation has spiraled in ways I didn't expect. The day after I posted, my Uncle Elliot showed up at my apartment. This is the same uncle who made the BMW comment at the party. He knocked on my door around 6 p.m. on a Thursday. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there in his golf clothes looking uncomfortable. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He started by saying he wasn't there to take sides. He said he just wanted to understand what was happening because Henry and Connie were devastated. He said they'd called him crying multiple times and he'd never seen his brother like this. I told him that was interesting because I'd been devastated for years and nobody seemed to care about that. He said that was different. I asked how. He didn't have an answer. Then he tried a different approach. He said family was supposed to stick together. He said, whatever problems we had, we should work them out privately, not through lawyers and courts. I told him I'd tried working it out privately for a decade, and it got me publicly humiliated at a retirement party. He said my dad was just joking around. He said I was being too sensitive. I asked him if he'd think it was funny if someone told 50 people that his kid was a worthless piece of garbage who couldn't afford basic transportation. He got quiet. Then he said the real reason he came. He wanted to know if there was any amount of money that would make me drop the partition action. He said my parents were willing to pay me to walk away. I asked how much. He said they could probably come up with $20,000, maybe $25,000. I laughed. I told him the house was worth $850,000 and my share was about $176,000. I asked him if he seriously thought I'd take $25,000 and let them keep a house worth that much. He said the house was their home and they'd lived there for 30 years. I said it was legally mine, and they'd treated me like garbage for 28 years. He left after that. But here's what made me realize how serious this was getting. My Uncle Elliot isn't just some random family member. He's a real estate attorney. Not the kind who handles partition sales, but he knows property law. And if he was coming to my door offering money, that meant my parents had already talked to him about whether they could fight this legally, which meant they'd already figured out they couldn't. 2 days later, my brother Cody showed up. Different approach entirely. He came on a Saturday morning with coffee and bagels like we were going to have some kind of friendly chat. I let him in because I wanted to hear what he had to say. He sat on my couch and started by saying he'd been thinking about everything. He said he understood why I was angry. He said the party was out of line and Dad shouldn't have said those things. But then he said I was making this about the wrong thing. He said this wasn't really about the house. This was about my pride being hurt. He said I was trying to punish our parents for hurting my feelings and that was immature. I asked him if he remembered the last family dinner we had together. He said he didn't. I said it was Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I told him I remembered it perfectly. I'd shown up with a pie from the grocery store because I couldn't afford to make one from scratch. Mom made a comment about it. Then during dinner, Dad asked me when I was going to get a real job. Cody jumped in and said he knew someone who was hiring for warehouse positions if I was interested. Kayla said maybe I should try going back to school part-time. Everyone had suggestions for how I could fix my life. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody asked if I liked what I was doing. They just spent 2 hours telling me everything that was wrong with me. Cody said he didn't remember it being that bad. I said that's because he wasn't the one being criticized. He said maybe people were trying to help. I told him that helping would have been offering support or encouragement. What they did was make me feel like I was failing at being human. Then Cody switched tactics. He said even if I was right about how they treated me, forcing them out of their house was too extreme. He said they were getting older and this kind of stress could seriously affect their health. He said Mom had been crying for days. Dad wasn't sleeping. They'd both lost weight. He asked me if I really wanted to be responsible for making my parents sick. I told him I wasn't responsible for their reaction. I was exercising my legal rights to property that was left to me. He said it wasn't that simple. He said the will gave them a life estate, which meant they were supposed to be able to live there until they died. I told him to go read the actual law. A life estate doesn't prevent a partition sale. It just means they have the right to live there until the property is sold, and then that right ends. The law is clear. Any tenant in common can force a partition at any time for any reason. Their life estate doesn't stop me. Cody got frustrated then. He said I was hiding behind legal technicalities to justify being cruel. I said I was using the law to protect myself from people who'd been cruel to me my entire life. He said I was exaggerating. I asked him to name one time in the last 10 years when Mom or Dad had said they were proud of me. One time. He couldn't. Then he asked what it would take to make this go away. I said nothing. He said everyone has a price. I told him I'd already been offered $25,000 by Uncle Elliot and it wasn't enough. He looked surprised that I knew about that. He said, what if they went higher? What if they offered $50,000? I said no. He asked what my number was. I said there wasn't one. The house was getting sold and I was getting my share. He could either join me and get his share too, or he could sit back and watch, but either way it was happening. He left angry, but I noticed something. He didn't argue with the legal facts. He didn't say, I couldn't do this. He only argued that I shouldn't, which told me he'd already looked into it and knew I was right. Then things got complicated in a way I didn't see coming. My sister Kayla posted something on social media. I don't follow her anymore, but a friend sent me a screenshot. She didn't name me directly, but it was obvious. She wrote about how family was supposed to support each other through hard times, how some people hold grudges instead of choosing forgiveness, how she was watching someone destroy the people who raised them over hurt feelings and pride, how heartbroken she was to see this happening. The comments were full of people supporting her, talking about how terrible it must be to watch a family member do this, how some people never appreciate what they have until it's gone. A few of her friends commented saying they'd heard about the situation and couldn't believe someone would do this to their own parents. She'd told her friends enough details that they knew it was about me and the house. I wanted to respond. I wanted to comment on that post and tell everyone the full story. I wanted to explain exactly why I was doing this and what they'd done to me. But my lawyer had told me not to engage on social media. He said anything I posted could potentially be used in court, so I didn't respond. But it made me furious that she was playing victim when she'd been part of the problem. Because Kayla wasn't innocent in all this. Every time the family criticized me, she joined in. Every time they made comments about my life, she added her own observations about how I could do better. She acted like she was trying to help, but it was just another form of judgment. And now she was posting on social media about how hurt she was that I was doing this. Then my parents escalated. They filed a motion with the court. My lawyer called me on a Monday afternoon to tell me about it. They were trying to delay the partition sale. Their argument was that the life estate gave them the right to remain in the home, and that forcing a sale would violate that right. My lawyer said it was a weak argument and wouldn't work, but it would slow things down. The hearing date would get pushed back while the court considered their motion. I asked how long. He said probably another 2 months, maybe 3. I asked if this would actually stop the sale. He said no. The law was clear and we'd win, but it would delay everything and create more legal expenses. My parents had hired an attorney and were fighting back. I asked who their attorney was. He told me the name and I looked him up. Real estate litigation specialist. Expensive, which meant my parents were spending money they probably didn't have to fight this. Money that would ultimately come out of the house value when it sold, which meant less money for all 3 of us in the end. They were burning cash to delay the inevitable. That night I got a text from Cody. He said we needed to talk in person and it was urgent. I ignored it. He texted again an hour later. He said mom and dad had taken out the home equity line to pay for Kayla's college and his graduate school. He said if the house got sold, they'd have nothing left after paying off the debt. He said I was basically stealing the money they'd spent on my siblings' education. I called him. I asked him when exactly they took out that home equity line. He said about 7 years ago. I asked him why they took it out. He said for education expenses. I asked why they needed to borrow money for that. He got defensive. He said graduate school was expensive and Kayla's undergrad wasn't cheap either. I asked him why they didn't use savings. He said they didn't have enough savings. I asked him why they didn't ask us to take out our own student loans like normal people. He said they wanted to help. Then I asked him the question I'd been holding back. I asked him if they'd offered to help pay for my college when I went for that one semester. There was a long silence. He said that was different because I dropped out. I said I dropped out after one semester, which means they could have helped pay for that one semester. Did they? Another silence. He said he didn't remember. I said I remembered. I took out loans. I paid for it myself. And when I dropped out, I was the one stuck with the debt. They didn't offer to help me. They just told me I'd made a huge mistake. Cody said that was because I quit. I said I quit after one semester, which means they could have supported me during that semester the same way they'd supported him and Kayla for years, but they didn't. He said, I'm twisting this around. I said no. I'm finally seeing it clearly. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on his and Kayla's education by borrowing against a house that belonged to all three of us. They used my asset to pay for their futures while leaving me with nothing. And now, he wanted me to feel bad about taking my share. He hung up on me, but I'd gotten my answer. The home equity line that was going to reduce all of our shares? That was money spent on Cody and Kayla, not on me. They'd literally borrowed against my inheritance to invest in my siblings. I called my lawyer the next day. I told him what I'd learned. He said it didn't change anything legally. The house would still be sold and the debt would still be paid off first. But he said it might be useful information if my parents tried to argue that the partition would cause them undue hardship. I could point out that they'd created their own hardship by borrowing against an asset they didn't fully own. My parents tried to contact me directly again. My mom showed up at the grocery store where I was shopping. I don't know if she followed me or if it was coincidence, but suddenly she was there in the produce section. She looked terrible. Her hair wasn't done. She was wearing sweatpants. She looked like she'd been crying for days. She said we needed to talk. I kept picking out vegetables. She said I couldn't just ignore her. I said I wasn't ignoring her. I just had nothing to say. She said I was killing her. She said she couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. She said every day she woke up thinking about losing the house. I said that's interesting because I spent years waking up thinking about how my own family made me feel worthless. She said that's not fair. I said nothing about this was fair. Then she said something that made me stop. She said I didn't understand what that house meant to them. It was where they'd raised us. It was where every holiday happened. It was where all their memories were. It was their whole life. I looked at her and said maybe they should have thought about that before they humiliated me in front of 50 people at a retirement party. Maybe they should have thought about it before spending a decade making me feel like I was the biggest disappointment of their lives. Maybe they should have treated their house like it mattered and their son like he mattered too. She started crying right there in the produce section. She said they'd made mistakes, but they didn't deserve this. I said I'd made mistakes too, but I didn't deserve how they treated me. She said we could fix this. She said we could be a family again if I just dropped the lawsuit. I told her there was no lawsuit. It was a partition action and it was happening. She asked what she had to do to make me stop. I said there was nothing she could do. I walked away while she was still crying. I should have felt bad. A normal person would feel bad watching their mother cry in a grocery store. But I'd waited 3 years for this. 3 years of keeping my head down and letting them think I was exactly what they said I was. 3 years of saving money and making plans and preparing for the moment when I could show them that I wasn't worthless. That I had power too. That I could take something from them the way they'd taken my dignity from me over and over. The court date for their motion is in 3 weeks. My lawyer says we'll win. The partition will go forward. The house will be sold. I'll get my money. And my parents will have to figure out what to do with the rest of their lives. But now, half the family knows about this and half of them think I'm destroying everything over hurt feelings. My Uncle Elliot isn't speaking to me. Some cousins I haven't seen in years are texting me saying I should reconsider. Kayla's social media posts keep getting more dramatic. Cody is trying to calculate whether it would be worth it for him to join the partition and get his share. And my parents are spending money they don't have on a lawyer who can't actually stop this from happening. I keep thinking about what Cody said, that this isn't about the house, that it's about my pride being hurt. And maybe he's right. Maybe this is about pride. But it's also about finally standing up for myself. It's about finally showing them that I'm not the failure they've always said I was. It's about taking back something that was mine all along. The hearing is in 3 weeks. I'll update after that. Update 2. The hearing was last week. I'm still processing everything that happened, not just at the courthouse but what came after. This whole situation has gone from a family dispute to something I don't even know how to describe anymore. My lawyer told me to dress nicely for the hearing. I bought a decent shirt and pants from a thrift store. My parents showed up looking like they hadn't slept in weeks. My mom's hair was graying at the roots like she'd stopped getting it colored. My dad had lost weight. His suit hung off him differently than it used to. They sat on the other side of the courtroom with their lawyer and didn't look at me once. The hearing was supposed to be about their motion to block the partition based on the life estate. Their lawyer argued that forcing the sale would violate their right to remain in the home until death. He talked about how they'd lived there for 30 years, raised 3 children there, made it their entire life. He said partition sales were meant for situations where co-owners couldn't agree on property use. But this situation was different because the life estate created a special circumstance. My lawyer stood up and explained that the life estate didn't prevent partition. He cited 3 different cases where courts had allowed partition sales even when life estates existed. He said the law was unambiguous. Any tenant in common has an absolute right to partition regardless of other interests in the property. The life estate holders get their interest converted to proceeds from the sale based on their life expectancy, but they can't block the sale itself. The judge asked my parents' lawyer if he had any case law supporting his position. The lawyer admitted he didn't. The judge asked why they'd filed the motion if the law was this clear. The lawyer said they were hoping the court would consider the equitable circumstances. The judge said equity doesn't override statutory rights. Motion denied. The partition sale would proceed. My parents' lawyer asked for 90 days to prepare for the actual partition hearing. My lawyer said 60 days was standard. The judge split the difference and gave them 75 days. So now we're waiting another 2.5 months before the final hearing, where the court orders the actual sale. My dad stood up while the judge was still talking. He said this wasn't right. He said the house was theirs and I had no right to take it. The judge told him to sit down. My dad said I was destroying my family over money. The judge said if he didn't sit down immediately, he'd be held in contempt. My dad sat down, but he was shaking. My mom was crying silently. We left the courthouse separately. I went to my car and just sat there for a while. I'd won. The partition was happening. But watching my dad lose control like that in court made something shift. Not regret exactly. More like this realization that I'd actually done it. I'd backed them into a corner they couldn't get out of. 3 years of planning and it was working exactly like I'd wanted. I drove home and tried to go back to work like normal. But 2 days later, Cody called me. Not texted. Actually called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. He said he'd been thinking about everything since the hearing. He said he'd talked to a lawyer of his own. Not the family lawyer. His own lawyer. And his lawyer told him that if the partition was happening either way, he should join it and get his share. Because if he didn't, the house would still be sold. But he'd be leaving $176,000 on the table for no reason. I asked him what changed his mind. He said watching mom and dad at the hearing, seeing how much they'd aged, realizing they'd spent their whole lives building something and now it was getting taken away. He said if that's what was happening to them, he wasn't going to let it happen to him too. He was getting his share. I asked him if he'd told our parents yet. He said no. He wanted to talk to me first. He said we could coordinate with our lawyers and join the partition together. Present a united front. I asked him what Kayla thought. He said he hadn't told her either, but she'd figure it out when the legal papers arrived. We talked for over an hour. He told me he'd gone back and looked at the actual will after our last conversation. He'd read it carefully, and he'd realized I was right about the home equity line. Our parents had borrowed against an asset that belonged to all 3 of us, used that money for him and Kayla, and never asked me or included me in that decision. He said when he really thought about it, that wasn't fair. He said he'd benefited from my inheritance without realizing it, and now that I was taking my share, he should take his too. But then he said something that made me pause. He said this wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about the fact that our parents had always treated us differently. He'd been the golden child. Kayla had been the baby. I'd been the problem. And he said he'd never questioned that dynamic because it worked in his favor. But watching this unfold made him see how much they'd failed me. And if they'd failed me that badly, maybe they'd failed him too by making him think that was okay. I didn't know what to say to that. For 3 years, I'd been angry at all of them. My parents for how they treated me. My siblings for going along with it. But here was Cody, admitting that he'd seen it and ignored it because it benefited him. That's not the same as an apology, but it's something. He filed his joinder to the partition 3 days later. Now it's both of us forcing the sale. The house will still sell. The proceeds will be split 3 ways. But now our parents have lost two of their three children in this fight instead of just one. Kayla found out when the legal papers were served. She called me screaming. She said I'd turned Cody against the family. She said I'd poisoned him with my bitterness, and now he was destroying mom and dad too. I told her I didn't make Cody do anything. He made his own choice based on his own interests. She said he would never have done this if I hadn't started it. I said maybe he would have, if he'd thought about it clearly instead of just following what our parents wanted. She asked me if I was happy now, if this was what I wanted. 2 against 2 with her stuck in the middle. I told her she wasn't stuck anywhere. She could join us and get her share too. She said she'd never do that. She said some things were more important than money. I said she only thought that because she'd already gotten her money through the home equity line that paid for her college. She hung up on me. My parents found out about Cody joining when their lawyer called them. My mom showed up at Cody's house that same day. He told me about it later. She rang the doorbell, and when he answered, she started hitting him. Not hard, just hitting his chest and arms while crying and asking how he could do this to them. His wife had to pull her away and get her to sit down. My mom told Cody he was killing her. She said losing the house was bad enough, but losing both her sons was going to destroy her. She said she'd given him everything. She'd sacrificed for him. She'd put him through school and supported his career and helped him buy his first house, and this was how he repaid her. Cody said he tried to explain about the home equity line, about how they'd used our inheritance to pay for his education, about how that wasn't fair to me. My mom said life isn't fair and he needed to grow up and understand that. She said parents make choices about how to allocate resources and children don't get to question those choices years later. Cody said actually they do when those resources were legally the children's property to begin with. My mom left crying, but she came back the next day with my dad. They both tried to convince Cody to withdraw from the partition. They said if he did, they'd find a way to pay him the money he would have gotten. They'd take out a loan or something. Cody asked them how they'd qualify for a loan at their age with their current debt level. My dad said they'd figure it out. Cody said no. The house was getting sold. He was getting his share. They needed to accept that. My dad said Cody was dead to him. Just like that. He said if Cody went through with this, then he no longer had a son named Cody. My mom told him not to say that. My dad said he meant it. Cody had been his pride and joy, the son who did everything right, and now he was betraying them just like I had. Worse than me, actually, because he'd known better and done it anyway. Cody told them to leave. They wouldn't. They sat in his living room and kept trying to convince him. They were there for 3 hours. Cody finally told them if they didn't leave, he'd call the police. My dad said, go ahead, call them. See if they'll arrest a father for trying to save his own home. Cody called anyway. My parents left before the police arrived, but the whole neighborhood saw them leaving and saw the police car pull up. Now Cody's neighbors know something is happening. The next day, I got a message from one of my cousins. She said the whole extended family was talking about this. She said Uncle Elliot had told everyone that Cody and I were forcing our parents out of their house. She said some people were saying we were being vindictive and cruel. Others were saying if Grandma left us the house, then we had the right to it. But everyone was picking sides. The family was splitting over this. I went to a family barbecue at my aunt's house on a Saturday. My mom's sister. I wasn't sure if I should go, but I wanted to see who would actually talk to me. My aunt let me in, but she was cold. She said she was disappointed in how I was handling things. I said she didn't know the full story. She said she knew enough. Half the people there wouldn't speak to me. The other half were cautiously polite. My cousin Jet, who's close to my age, pulled me aside. He said he'd heard everything from multiple people. He said honestly it sounded like my parents had screwed me over for years, and I was finally doing something about it. He said more power to me, but he also said I should be prepared for the fact that most of the family was going to side with my parents because that's what families do. They side with the older generation even when they're wrong. Then my Uncle Elliot showed up. He saw me and walked straight over. He said I needed to leave. I said I was invited. He said he didn't care. This was a family gathering and I wasn't acting like family. I said I was family whether he liked it or not. He said family doesn't destroy each other over property. I said family doesn't humiliate each other at retirement parties either, but here we were. My aunt stepped in and said everyone needed to calm down. Uncle Elliot said there was nothing to calm down about. I was forcing his brother out of his home, and now I'd convinced Cody to join me. I said I didn't convince Cody of anything. Cody made his own choice. Uncle Elliot said Cody never would have done this if I hadn't started it. I left before it turned into a bigger scene, but driving home, I realized something. This wasn't just about me and my parents anymore. This wasn't even just about me and my siblings. This was about the entire family structure. I'd challenged the basic assumption that children respect and defer to their parents no matter what. I'd said no, actually. If you treat your kid like garbage for years, that kid has the right to fight back. And that idea was threatening to everyone who'd ever been on the parent side of that dynamic. Kayla posted again on social media. This time, she named Cody specifically. She said she couldn't believe her own brother had turned against their parents. She said she'd always looked up to him and now she didn't know who he was. She said some people would do anything for money, even if it meant destroying the people who loved them. The comments were brutal. Some people were supporting her. Others were asking what the full story was. One person said it sounded like there was more going on than she was sharing. Cody commented on her post. He said she should take it down because she didn't understand the full legal and financial situation. She responded that she understood perfectly. He was choosing money over family. He deleted his comment and called her instead. They fought for 45 minutes. He told me later that she'd said he was just as bad as me now, that he'd chosen to side with the family failure instead of standing with her and their parents. He said he tried to explain about the home equity line and the unfair treatment, but she wouldn't hear it. My parents put their house on the market themselves before the court ordered the sale. My lawyer called me and said they'd listed it as for sale by owner. I asked if they could do that. He said technically yes, but it wouldn't stop the partition action. If they sold it themselves, the proceeds would still have to be divided according to the ownership structure, and they couldn't sell it without all three co-owners agreeing to the sale terms. So basically they were trying to control the sale process, but they still couldn't keep the money. I drove by the house. There was a for sale sign in the yard. My childhood home with a sign in front of it. I'd imagined this moment for 3 years. I'd imagined how good it would feel to see them lose the thing they cared about more than they cared about me. But actually seeing it felt different. Not bad exactly, just different, more real, more permanent. The listing price was $899,000, higher than what I'd estimated. My lawyer said they were probably trying to maximize the proceeds so they'd have more money after paying off their debts. But he also said the market had cooled and they might not get that price. We'd see what happened. Cody called me that night. He said he'd seen the listing too. He asked me if I felt guilty. I said no. He said he did. A little. Not enough to stop, but enough to feel it. I asked him what he felt guilty about. He said about mom and dad losing their home, about the family being torn apart, about Kayla hating both of us now. But then he said he also felt angry because they'd created this situation by treating me the way they did and borrowing against the house the way they did. So the guilt was mixed with anger and he didn't know what to do with that. I told him I'd stopped feeling guilty after the retirement party. That was the moment when whatever part of me still cared about their feelings died completely. He said he wished he'd been there to see it. Not because he wanted to see me humiliated, but because he wanted to understand exactly what happened that made me decide to do this. I said he could have been there. He'd been invited. He said he'd had other plans. I said that's the point. He always had other plans when it came to choosing between our parents and me. The partition sale hearing is in 75 days. The house might sell before then, or it might not, and the court will order it sold at auction. Either way, it's happening. My parents have lost. I've won. Cody's won too now. Kayla's going to get her share whether she wants it or not, and the family is completely fractured in ways I don't think can be repaired. Someone commented on my first post saying I should be prepared for the fact that this might destroy more than just my relationship with my parents. They were right. This is destroying everything, but I'm not stopping. I can't stop now even if I wanted to. The legal process is in motion. The house is getting sold. The money is getting divided, and everyone is going to have to live with what comes after. Final update. The house sold 6 weeks ago. I'm writing this because some of you asked for a final update and because I need to process what happened. This isn't a redemption story. Nobody learned a valuable lesson. Nobody apologized and meant it. The family is broken and it's staying broken. My parents accepted an offer 3 weeks before the final partition hearing. $875,000. Not the $899,000 they listed it for, but close enough. My lawyer said they probably took a lower offer to avoid the court-ordered auction, which would have been more public and possibly gotten them even less money. The sale closed on a Wednesday. I got the call from my lawyer that afternoon. After paying off the mortgage balance and the home equity line, after paying all the legal fees and closing costs, there was $512,000 left, divided 3 ways, $170,666.67 for each of us. Slightly less than I'd calculated originally, but still more money than I'd ever had in my life. The money hit my account 2 days later. I checked my banking app and saw the number and just stared at it for probably 10 minutes. 6 figures in my account. Money that was legally mine. Money I'd fought for. Money I'd destroyed my family to get. I bought a car that weekend. Nothing fancy. A used Toyota that was 4 years old and had reasonable mileage. But it was mine, and it was reliable, and I didn't have to ride a bicycle in the rain anymore. I drove it to work on Monday, and one of my coworkers asked if I'd won the lottery. I said something like that. I put most of the rest in savings. I moved to a better apartment. one with working hot water and heat that actually keeps the place warm. I'm still doing food delivery because the money isn't going to last forever if I'm not careful, but I'm doing it by choice now, instead of necessity. I'm thinking about going back to school, but I haven't decided yet. Cody got his money the same day I did. He called me that evening. He said he'd transferred most of it to investment accounts. He said it would help with his kids' college funds and maybe let him retire a few years earlier than planned. He said it was strange having this much money that came from destroying our parents' lives. I said it wasn't strange at all. It was exactly what should have happened. Kayla got her money too. She didn't want it. She tried to refuse it. Apparently, she called the title company and said she wasn't accepting her portion. They told her it didn't work that way. The money was hers whether she wanted it or not. She could donate it if she wanted, but they were transferring it to her account regardless. So she got $170,666.67 that she never asked for and openly resents having. She posted about it on social media. She said, "Blood money doesn't spend well." She said she'd gotten a third of the value of her parents' home against her will, and she'd never wanted any of it. She said some people destroy families over greed and force everyone else to participate in their cruelty. The comments were split. Some people saying she should donate it to charity if she felt that way. Others saying she was being dramatic and should just accept the money and move on. One person said if she really didn't want it, she should give it to her parents. I'm guessing that person didn't understand the situation. My parents had to be out of the house by closing day. Cody told me they'd been packing for 2 weeks. They'd lived in that house for 30 years, and they had to pack up 3 decades of their lives and figure out where to go. They'd been looking at apartments, but everything in their price range was small and in worse neighborhoods than they were used to. They'd also been looking at buying something smaller, but they couldn't qualify for a mortgage. Too much debt, not enough income now that my dad was retired. They ended up renting a 2-bedroom apartment about 20 miles from where the house was. Kayla helped them move. She took time off work and spent 3 days packing their stuff and loading a moving truck. She posted photos of herself carrying boxes. She wrote about how hard it was watching her parents lose everything, how they'd built that house into a home, and now they were living in a small apartment with thin walls and a parking lot view. Cody didn't help them move. He said he couldn't take the time off work. I think he just couldn't face them. I definitely couldn't face them, so I didn't even consider helping. My dad tried calling me the week after the sale closed. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. He said I'd gotten what I wanted. I'd destroyed them. I'd taken their home and their dignity and their future. He said I should be proud of myself. He said he hoped the money was worth it. He said he hoped I could live with what I'd done. Then he said he never wanted to see me or hear from me again. He said as far as he was concerned, he didn't have a son named Jet anymore. Good. I didn't want to be his son anymore anyway. My mom called me a few days later. Different approach. She said they were settled in the apartment. She said it was small, but they were managing. She said she wanted me to come visit so I could see what my actions had led to. She said maybe if I saw them living in this tiny space with barely any room for their furniture, I'd understand what I'd done. I told her I understood perfectly. I'd exercised my legal rights to property that was mine. She said it was more than that, and I knew it. She said I'd wanted revenge, and I'd gotten it. She asked if I felt better now. I said yes, actually, I did. She said I was lying to myself. I said I'd spent 3 years planning this, and every single day of those 3 years, I thought about the retirement party and every comment before that, and I'd been waiting for this exact outcome. She said I was sick. I said maybe. But I was sick and $170,000 richer, so I'd take it. She hung up. She hasn't called since. The extended family drama continued for a while. Uncle Elliot sent me a long text message. He said I'd destroyed his brother's retirement. He said they'd worked their entire lives to build something, and I'd taken it away in a matter of months. He said family was supposed to protect each other, and I'd done the opposite. He said I was everything wrong with my generation. Entitled. Selfish. Willing to destroy anything for money. I didn't respond. My aunt, my mom's sister, uninvited me from all future family gatherings. She sent me a message saying I was no longer welcome at holiday dinners or birthdays, or any family events. She said what I'd done was unforgivable, and she didn't want her children exposed to someone who could treat their own parents this way. I told her that was fine. I hadn't planned on going anyway. My cousin Jet, the one who'd been somewhat supportive, reached out to check on me. He said the family was completely divided now. Some people thought I was justified. Most people thought I was cruel. He said holiday gatherings were going to be awkward for years. I said that wasn't my problem. He said it kind of was since I'd caused it. I said my parents caused it by treating me like garbage for a decade. He said both things could be true. Cody and Kayla aren't speaking. She blames him for siding with me. She told him he'd chosen money over family, and she'd never forget it. He told her she could think whatever she wanted, but he'd made the right choice based on the legal and financial reality. She said legal and financial reality didn't matter when you were destroying your parents. He said maybe she should think about why the parents had put themselves in a position where their children could legally force the sale of a house they didn't fully own. Kayla tried to give her money to our parents. She offered them the full $170,666.67. They refused it. My mom told her they couldn't take her money. Kayla said it was their money, really. My mom said no, it was money from the sale of the house, and taking it would feel like accepting what had happened. Kayla insisted. My parents still refused. So now Kayla has $170,000 she doesn't want and can't give away and resents every time she thinks about it. I ran into my dad at a hardware store about 3 weeks after the sale. Pure coincidence. I was buying supplies for my new apartment. He was in the plumbing aisle. We saw each other from about 15 feet away. He stared at me. I stared back. Neither of us moved for probably 30 seconds. Then he walked over. He said I looked good. New clothes. Better than the shirt I'd been wearing at the retirement party. I said the money had helped. He flinched. He asked if I was happy now. I said I was happier than I'd been in 10 years. He said I'd destroyed the family for money. I said no. I'd reclaimed what was legally mine after the family destroyed me for years. He said those weren't the same thing. I said they were to me. He asked if I ever thought about what I'd done to them. If I ever felt guilty? I said no, not even a little bit. He asked how I could live with myself. I told him I'd been living with myself just fine for 3 years while I planned this. Living with the outcome was easy. He said I'd regret this eventually, when I was older and understood what family meant. I told him I understood what family meant. It meant people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, but actually only loved you when you met their standards. It meant people who humiliated you publicly and expected you to take it. It meant people who borrowed against your inheritance to pay for your siblings' futures while leaving you with nothing. He said I was twisting everything. I said I was seeing everything clearly for the first time. He started to say something else, but I walked away. I didn't need to hear it. I'd said what I needed to say. I saw the apartment building where they're living now. I drove past it one day out of curiosity. It's not terrible, but it's not great. Small building, older construction. The kind of place people live when they're starting out or when something went wrong. Not the kind of place people retire to after 30 years of marriage and homeownership. I should have felt something looking at that building. Guilt or regret or something. But I didn't. I just felt satisfied. They'd spent decades making me feel small and worthless, and now they were living small, and I was moving forward with money and options and a future I'd built by refusing to accept their version of who I was. Some of you commented on my first post saying this would destroy more than just my relationship with my parents. You were right. My relationship with Kayla is gone. She'll never forgive me for this. My relationship with my parents was already gone, but now it's permanently, irrevocably destroyed. Most of my extended family won't talk to me. The ones who do talk to me do it carefully, like I'm dangerous. Cody and I talk sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. We have this shared understanding now. We both did something that the family will never forgive. We both chose money and justice over maintaining peace. We both decided that being right was more important than being liked. I don't know if that makes us closer or just makes us both outsiders together. My parents are 61 years old living in a 2-bedroom apartment they never wanted. They'll probably have to work longer than they planned. They'll have to adjust their retirement expectations. They'll have to live with the fact that the home they spent 30 years building is gone, and 2 of their 3 children made that happen. I'm 28 years old with $170,000 in the bank and a car that starts every morning and an apartment where the heat works. I'm not rich, but I'm stable in ways I've never been before. I'm not delivering food forever. I'm figuring out what comes next. The retirement party was 3 months ago. My dad grabbed a microphone and told 50 people that I was his biggest mistake, that I delivered food on a bicycle, that I lived in a basement that smelled like piss and ramen, that I was embarrassing him in front of his friends. I handed him an envelope with a letter from my lawyer. By midnight, he was begging me not to destroy him. 3 months later, his house is sold. The money is divided. The family is fractured beyond repair. And I'm not sorry. A few people asked if this was worth it, if destroying my family over money was really the answer. But that question misses the point. This was never about money. The money was just the tool. This was about showing them that I wasn't worthless, that I wasn't the failure they'd spent years saying I was, that I had power, too, that I could take something from them the way they'd taken my dignity from me over and over. Was it worth it? Yes. Every single day of the 3 years I planned this, every dollar I saved, every time I let them mock me while I built my case, every moment of the partition action, every penny of the $170,666.67. Worth it. My dad said I was his biggest mistake at that party. Turns out his biggest mistake was underestimating exactly how much damage that mistake could do when it finally fought back.